In the quiet town of Maplewood, life had always moved at a slow and predictable pace. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it was the kind of place where everyone knew their neighbors, and gossip traveled faster than the wind. The townsfolk prided themselves on their community's charm and simplicity. But beneath the surface of this idyllic setting lay secrets that no one dared to speak about openly. Secrets tied to the courthouse, the heart of local governance. It was here, in this unassuming brick building, that the story of Judge Richard Harlan began to unravel, setting off a chain reaction that would change Maplewood forever. Karoline Leavitt had lived in Maplewood for most of her life. A woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, she had built a reputation as someone who didn't back down from a challenge. Karoline ran a small consulting firm specializing in financial audits, helping businesses ensure their books were clean and compliant. She wasn't flashy or loud, but there was something about her determination that made people take notice. When rumors first surfaced about questionable dealings within the courthouse, Karoline dismissed them as idle chatter. After all, Judge Harlan had been a pillar of the community for decades. He was known for his stern demeanor and unwavering commitment to justice, or so everyone thought. But curiosity got the better of Karoline. One evening, while working late in her home office, she stumbled upon something odd while reviewing public records for a client. A series of city contracts caught her attention, not because they were unusual in themselves, but because they seemed to follow a peculiar pattern. Each contract had been awarded to obscure companies that appeared out of nowhere, completed their work hastily, and then vanished just as quickly. Intrigued, Karoline decided to dig deeper. What started as a casual investigation soon turned into an obsession. She spent countless nights cross-referencing documents, tracing money trails and connecting dots that others had overlooked. The more Karoline uncovered, the more alarmed she became. Payments linked to these contracts led to offshore accounts, registered under names she didn't recognize at first glance. However, after weeks of painstaking research, she discovered a shocking connection. Those accounts were tied directly to entities associated with Judge Harlan. At first, Karoline doubted her own findings. How could someone so respected be involved in such blatant corruption? Yet the evidence was undeniable. Bank statements, transaction logs, and company registration papers painted a damning picture. Every new discovery left her feeling both exhilarated and terrified. If what she suspected was true, exposing it could put her squarely in the crosshairs of powerful enemies. As word of Karoline's investigation spread through whispers among close friends and colleagues, opinions were divided. Some encouraged her to pursue the truth, praising her courage and tenacity. Others warned her to tread carefully, reminding her of the risks involved in taking on someone like Judge Harlan. "You're playing with fire," one friend cautioned over coffee. "People don't want to hear this kind of thing about someone they trust." Despite the warnings, Karoline couldn't ignore what she had found. For her, it wasn't just about uncovering wrongdoing. It was about holding power accountable. Growing up in Maplewood, she had seen how unchecked authority could stifle progress and harm ordinary people. This fight felt personal now. Meanwhile, Judge Harlan remained outwardly calm, projecting an image of confidence during public appearances. Behind closed doors, however, he was anything but composed. Reports of Karoline's probe reached him quickly, thanks to informants planted throughout the town. At first, he dismissed the allegations as baseless accusations fueled by jealousy or misunderstanding. But as details emerged, details too specific to ignore, he grew increasingly uneasy. Late-night meetings with his lawyers became routine, and frantic phone calls to associates abroad hinted at preparations for the worst-case scenario. Still, Harlan refused to believe that his meticulously crafted facade could crumble so easily. The tension escalated when Karoline filed an $800 million lawsuit against Judge Harlan, accusing him of embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of power. The sheer magnitude of the claim sent shockwaves through Maplewood. People gathered in cafes and grocery stores, debating whether such a bold move was justified or reckless. For many, the idea of suing a judge, a figure traditionally seen as impartial and untouchable, was almost unimaginable. Yet Karoline stood firm, confident in the strength of her case. She hired a team of skilled attorneys and poured every resource she had into preparing for battle. Her days blurred together as she pored over documents, rehearsed arguments, and strategized next steps. Exhaustion gnawed at her, but adrenaline kept her going. While Karoline worked tirelessly, Judge Harlan scrambled to contain the fallout. Publicly, he maintained his innocence, delivering impassioned speeches about integrity and fairness. Privately, though he explored ways to discredit Karoline's claims, his allies launched smear campaigns, questioning her motives and credibility. Anonymous articles appeared online, painting her as a disgruntled opportunist seeking revenge for past grievances. Harlan hoped these tactics would sway public opinion and weaken her resolve. Instead, they only strengthened Karoline's determination. Each attack served as fuel for her fire, reminding her why she had started this journey in the first place. Amidst the chaos, Maplewood transformed into a battleground of whispers and suspicions. Neighbors who once greeted each other warmly now exchanged wary glances. Conversations revolved around the unfolding drama, with everyone speculating about what might happen next. Would Karoline succeed in bringing down a man who had ruled the town's legal system for years? Or would Harlan manage to silence her before the truth came to light? The uncertainty hung heavy in the air, casting a shadow over the once peaceful town. For better or worse, life in Maplewood would never be the same again. For Karoline, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Beyond the mounting stress and sleepless nights, she faced threats that went beyond mere words. Strange cars parked outside her house, unfamiliar faces lingering near her office, and cryptic messages left on her voicemail. All signs pointed to intimidation. Yet she refused to let fear dictate her actions. With each passing day, her resolve hardened. She reminded herself why she had taken this step, not for fame or fortune, but for justice. If she succeeded, it wouldn't just be a victory for her. It would be a triumph for everyone who believed in fairness and accountability. Judge Harlan, on the other hand, found himself trapped in a web of his own making. As the evidence mounted and public scrutiny intensified, cracks began to show in his polished exterior. His usual composure faltered during interviews, and his explanations sounded increasingly hollow. Even his closest supporters started to distance themselves, sensing the tide turning against him. For a man accustomed to control, the loss of power was excruciating. Every headline, every accusation chipped away at the empire he had spent years building. And deep down, he knew that time was running out. Despite the mounting pressure, Karoline pressed forward, driven by a mix of conviction and defiance. She understood that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she also knew that giving up wasn't an option. Whether the outcome favored her or not, she had already achieved something remarkable, shining a light on corruption hidden in plain sight. In doing so, she inspired others to question the status quo and demand transparency. For the people of Maplewood, watching her stand tall against overwhelming odds was a lesson in courage, a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices can spark the biggest changes. As the lawsuit gained momentum, the atmosphere in Maplewood grew tense. People who had once gone about their daily routines with little thought now found themselves discussing the case at every opportunity. Grocery store aisles buzzed with speculation. Coffee shops became impromptu debate forums, and even children on playgrounds mimicked courtroom arguments they overheard from adults. The town seemed divided into two camps, those who supported Karoline Leavitt and believed her claims, and those who stood by Judge Richard Harlan, dismissing the allegations as baseless attacks on a respected figure. Yet, regardless of which side they were on, everyone agreed that the situation was unprecedented. Never before had such a scandal rocked the foundation of their quiet community. Karoline's days were filled with endless preparation. Her small office, usually neat and organized, now resembled a war room. Papers covered every surface. Spreadsheets, legal documents, handwritten notes, all meticulously arranged to form a cohesive narrative. She worked alongside her team of lawyers, bouncing ideas off them and refining strategies late into the At night. Despite the mounting pressure, Karoline remained focused, driven by an unshakable belief in the righteousness of her cause. Every detail mattered. Every piece of evidence could make or break the case. For someone who had always preferred working behind the scenes, stepping into the public eye felt daunting, but she knew it was necessary. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about setting an example for others who might feel powerless against corruption. Judge Harlan, meanwhile, struggled to maintain his composure. On the surface, he appeared calm during press conferences, delivering rehearsed statements about integrity and justice. But beneath his polished exterior, cracks were beginning to show. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie before cameras, and his voice occasionally wavered when addressing reporters. Those closest to him noticed subtle changes, his usual confidence replaced by paranoia, his sharp wit dulled by anxiety. He spent hours locked away in his study, poring over legal briefs and consulting with high-priced attorneys. Despite his efforts, the weight of the accusations pressed down on him like a heavy stone, making it harder to breathe with each passing day. The media frenzy surrounding the case only added fuel to the fire. National news outlets picked up the story, turning what had started as a local dispute into a national spectacle. Journalists flocked to Maplewood, setting up camp outside the courthouse and staking out Karoline's modest home. Camera crews jostled for position, microphones thrust toward anyone willing to comment. The constant attention took its toll on both parties involved. Karoline found herself bombarded with interview requests, some supportive, others hostile. She declined most of them, choosing instead to let her actions speak for themselves. Still, the scrutiny weighed heavily on her shoulders, forcing her to navigate not only the legal battle but also the court of public opinion. For Judge Harlan, the media coverage was equally relentless. Headlines screamed accusations, painting him as a villain in a town drama. Late-night talk show hosts joked about his predicament, while social media erupted with memes mocking his downfall. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, fearing guilt by association. Even his family bore the brunt of the backlash, receiving hateful messages and enduring whispered insults in public. His wife, once a prominent figure at charity events, retreated from view altogether, unable to face the judgmental stares of neighbors. It was as if the entire world had turned against him, leaving him isolated and vulnerable. Despite the chaos, Karoline refused to lose sight of her goal. She understood that the fight ahead would be grueling, but she drew strength from the support she received. Messages of encouragement poured in from strangers across the country, praising her bravery and offering words of solidarity. Some shared their own stories of battling corruption, reminding her that she wasn't alone. These gestures buoyed her spirits, reinforcing her determination to see the case through to the end. At times, she allowed herself moments of reflection, marveling at how far she had come since those initial sleepless nights spent poring over financial records. What had started as a personal quest for truth had evolved into something much larger, a movement for accountability and transparency. Behind the scenes, Judge Harlan explored desperate measures to salvage his reputation. He hired PR firms to craft sympathetic narratives, attempting to portray himself as a victim of circumstance. He reached out to influential allies, hoping they could sway public perception or intervene on his behalf. Yet no matter how hard he tried, the tide continued to turn against him. Evidence mounted linking him to offshore accounts and shady business dealings. Witnesses came forward, corroborating Karoline's claims and adding new layers to the investigation. Each revelation chipped away at his carefully constructed facade, exposing the man beneath the robe. As the trial date approached, tensions reached a boiling point. Both sides prepared feverishly, knowing that the outcome would have far-reaching implications. Karoline's legal team pored over every document, anticipating potential counter-arguments and strategizing ways to present their case convincingly. They rehearsed opening statements, cross-examinations, and closing arguments, leaving nothing to chance. Meanwhile, Judge Harlan's defense team scrambled to discredit the evidence, questioning its authenticity and relevance. They filed motions to delay proceedings, hoping to buy time and weaken the prosecution's momentum. But the judge overseeing the case denied their requests, citing the urgency of the matter and the public interest in resolving it swiftly. In Maplewood, life carried on amidst the turmoil, though nothing felt quite normal anymore. Conversations revolved around the impending trial, with everyone speculating about what might happen next. Would Karoline emerge victorious, proving beyond doubt that Judge Harlan was guilty? Or would he manage to evade accountability, walking away unscathed? Despite the overwhelming evidence, the uncertainty hung heavy in the air, casting a shadow over the once peaceful town. For some, the weight was unbearable. For others, it was a test of patience and faith in the justice system. Amidst the whirlwind of activity, Karoline found solace in small moments of clarity. Early mornings before the noise of the day began, she sat on her porch sipping coffee and watching the sunrise. These quiet interludes gave her time to reflect on why she had embarked on this journey. It wasn't fame or fortune that drove her. It was a deep-seated desire to create change, to challenge the status quo and inspire others to do the same. She thought about the people who had rallied behind her, believing in her mission even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Their trust meant everything to her, and she vowed not to let them down. For Judge Harlan, the days blurred together in a haze of fear and desperation. Sleep eluded him, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. He replayed conversations in his head, wondering where he had gone wrong, how he had allowed things to spiral so far out of control. Pride, greed, and arrogance. They were all factors, he realized, too late. Now, facing the possibility of losing everything he had worked for, he questioned whether it had been worth it. The power and prestige that once defined him suddenly felt hollow, meaningless in the face of impending ruin. As the trial loomed closer, the stakes couldn't have been higher. For Karoline, success meant more than vindication. It represented a chance to rewrite the rules, to prove that no one was above the law. Failure, on the other hand, would embolden those who sought to exploit the system, sending a message that accountability was optional. For Judge Harlan, the consequences were equally dire. Conviction would strip him of his title, tarnish his legacy, and potentially land him in prison. Acquittal, however unlikely, offered a glimmer of hope. But even then, the damage to his reputation was irreversible. Through it all, Maplewood held its breath, waiting to see how the story would unfold. The town had become a microcosm of larger, societal struggles, a battleground where ideals clashed and truths emerged. Whether the outcome favored Karoline or Judge Harlan, one thing was certain. The events unfolding in this quiet corner of the world would leave an indelible mark, not just on the people of Maplewood, but on anyone who dared to dream of a fairer, more just society. And as the sun set on another tumultuous day, the question lingered in the air. Would justice prevail, or would power protect itself at any cost? The morning of the preliminary hearing arrived, and Maplewood felt like it was holding its breath. The courthouse, usually a quiet and unassuming building, buzzed with activity as people lined up hours before the proceedings were set to begin. Reporters with bulky cameras and microphones jostled for position outside the entrance, while curious townsfolk craned their necks to catch a glimpse of Karoline Leavitt or Judge Richard Harlan. Inside, the courtroom was packed to capacity. Every seat was taken, and latecomers stood along the walls whispering nervously among themselves. The air was thick with anticipation, a mix of excitement and dread that seemed to press down on everyone present. Karoline walked into the room with her head held high, flanked by her team of lawyers. She wore a simple yet elegant suit, her expression calm but resolute. Despite the sleepless nights and mounting pressure, she exuded confidence, a woman who had prepared for this moment for months. As she took her place at the plaintiff's table, she glanced briefly at Judge Harlan sitting across the aisle. He looked pale and uneasy, his usual composure replaced by a faint tremor in his hands. For a fleeting second their eyes met, and Karoline saw something unexpected in his gaze. Not anger or defiance, but fear. It was a small victory, one that reassured her she was on the right path. The presiding judge, an older man with a reputation for fairness, called the court to order. The room fell silent as he outlined the purpose of the hearing, to determine whether there was sufficient evidence to proceed to a full trial. Karoline's lead attorney rose to speak first, laying out the case against Judge Harlan in meticulous detail. Slide after slide appeared on a projector screen, each one presenting damning evidence: bank statements showing suspicious transactions, emails revealing connections between Harlan and shell companies, and contracts awarded without proper bidding processes. The presentation was thorough and methodical, leaving little room for doubt about the depth of the corruption involved. Gasps rippled through the audience as new revelations came to light, some so shocking they sparked murmurs of disbelief. Judge Harlan's defense team countered with arguments aimed at discrediting the evidence. They questioned the authenticity of documents, suggested that witnesses might have ulterior motives, and accused Karoline's team of cherry-picking information to paint a biased picture. Their tone was defensive, almost desperate, as if they were fighting not just for their client's freedom but for his very survival. At times, their objections grew heated, drawing stern warnings from the presiding judge to maintain decorum. Yet, despite their efforts, the weight of the evidence seemed insurmountable. Even casual observers could sense the tide turning against Harlan. Throughout the hearing, Karoline remained focused, taking notes and occasionally whispering instructions to her attorneys. She knew this was only the beginning. The real battle would come later during the full trial. But she also understood the importance of making a strong impression now. Public perception mattered, especially in a case as high-profile as this. 1. Every word spoken, every piece of evidence presented shaped how people viewed the situation, and judging by the reactions around her, Karoline felt confident that she was winning not just in the courtroom, but also in the court of public opinion. Outside, the media frenzy reached fever pitch. Reporters rushed to file updates, analyzing every twist and turn of the hearing. Social media exploded with commentary, hashtags trending nationwide as people weighed in on the unfolding drama. Supporters of Karoline praised her bravery, calling her a modern-day hero standing up to entrenched power. Critics, meanwhile, continued to question her motives, accusing her of grandstanding or seeking revenge. Amidst the noise, however, one thing was clear. The story had captured the nation's attention, transforming a local dispute into a symbol of broader struggles against corruption and injustice. Back inside the courtroom, tensions escalated further during cross-examinations. One key witness, a former employee of a company linked to the fraudulent contracts, testified under oath about pressure from higher-ups to falsify records. His testimony painted a vivid picture of systemic corruption, implicating not just Harlan but others within the courthouse as well. When Harlan's lawyers attempted to discredit him, suggesting he was motivated by greed or bitterness, the witness remained steadfast, refusing to back down. "I'm here because it's the right thing to do," he said firmly, earning nods of approval from spectators. It was a pivotal moment, one that shifted the momentum decisively in Karoline's favor. As the day wore on, fatigue began to set, but no one dared leave. The stakes were too high and the drama unfolding before them was too compelling. Lawyers argued passionately, judges intervened to clarify points, and witnesses recounted stories that painted a complex web of deceit. By the time the hearing concluded late in the afternoon, both sides looked exhausted. Karoline exchanged a brief smile with her team, acknowledging the hard work they had put in. Across the aisle, Harlan sat slumped in his chair, his face etched with worry. Whatever confidence he had started the day with had evaporated, replaced by a growing realization that the walls were closing in. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maplewood buzzed with conversation. People gathered in living rooms, cafes, and parks, dissecting every detail of the hearing. Some expressed relief that justice seemed to be taking its course, while others voiced skepticism, questioning whether the legal system could truly hold someone like Harlan accountable. For Karoline, the day had been grueling, but rewarding. She returned home to find dozens of messages waiting for her, notes of encouragement from supporters across the country, praising her courage and thanking her for shining a light on corruption. Reading them brought tears to her eyes, reminding her why she had embarked on this journey in the first place. Yet even in moments of triumph, Karoline couldn't afford to relax. She knew Harlan's team would regroup, searching for ways to undermine her case. The road ahead remained long and uncertain, filled with challenges that required unwavering focus and resilience. Still, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection, sitting alone on her porch as night fell over Maplewood. The stars twinkled above, distant yet constant, offering a sense of perspective. This fight wasn't just about her or Harlan. It was about something bigger, a chance to prove that accountability mattered, that truth could prevail even in the face of overwhelming odds. For Judge Harlan, the aftermath of the hearing was bleak. Back at his home, he paced the floor restlessly, replaying the events of the day in his mind. The cracks in his carefully constructed facade were widening, exposing vulnerabilities he had spent years hiding. Calls to allies went unanswered, and texts seeking reassurance received vague replies at best. Isolation crept in, wrapping itself around him like a suffocating blanket. For the first time, he considered the possibility that he might lose, not just the case, but everything he had built. The thought terrified him, gnawing at his resolve and leaving him questioning whether redemption was still possible. Meanwhile, whispers of conspiracy theories began to circulate in Maplewood. Some speculated that Harlan's downfall was orchestrated by political rivals seeking to eliminate competition. Others suggested that Karoline's lawsuit was part of a larger agenda to dismantle traditional power structures. While these rumors lacked evidence, they added another layer of complexity to an already tangled narrative. In a town where secrets festered beneath the surface, paranoia thrived, fueling mistrust and division. For many residents, the line between fact and fiction blurred, making it harder to discern the truth. Despite the chaos, one undeniable truth emerged. The case had ignited a spark of hope in those who believed in justice. Karoline's determination inspired others to speak out, to challenge systems they once accepted without question. Conversations shifted from idle gossip to meaningful discussions about transparency and accountability. Teachers used the story as a lesson in ethics classes, while community leaders organized forums to address local issues. What had started as a personal quest for truth had blossomed into a movement, empowering ordinary people to demand change. As days turned into weeks, preparations for the full trial intensified. Karoline's team worked tirelessly, refining strategies, gathering additional evidence, and preparing for potential counter-arguments. They knew Harlan's defense would pull out all the stops, employing every tactic available to delay or derail the proceedings. Yet they were ready. Each member of the team brought unique strengths to the table, united by a shared commitment to seeing justice served. Their camaraderie provided a source of strength for Karoline, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this fight. For Judge Harlan, the countdown to the trial felt like a death sentence. Sleep became elusive, replaced by restless nights haunted by worst-case scenarios. He consulted with lawyers, explored options for appeal, and even entertained thoughts of fleeing, a desperate measure born of panic rather than logic. Yet deep down, he knew running wouldn't solve anything. The world had changed. There was no escaping the scrutiny or the consequences of his actions. All he could do was brace himself for what lay ahead, clinging to the faint hope that somehow, some way, he might salvage what remained of his life. In Maplewood, life carried on amidst the uncertainty, though nothing felt. The weeks leading up to the full trial were a whirlwind of activity for Karoline Leavitt and her team. Each day brought new challenges, from analyzing fresh evidence to preparing witnesses for cross-examination. The pressure was immense, but Karoline thrived under it, her determination unwavering. She spent long hours in strategy meetings, poring over documents with her legal team, debating every possible angle of attack. Her focus was razor-sharp, leaving little room for distractions. Yet even she couldn't ignore the mounting tension in Maplewood. The town had become a powder keg, ready to explode at any moment. Conversations revolved around one question: would Judge Richard Harlan face justice, or would he find a way to escape accountability? For Harlan, those same weeks felt like an eternity. Sleepless nights stretched into endless days as he grappled with the reality of his situation. His lawyers worked tirelessly to build a defense, filing motions to dismiss the case and challenging the admissibility of key pieces of evidence. But no matter how hard they tried, the mountain of incriminating information seemed insurmountable. Every document, every transaction, pointed directly back to him. The weight of it all bore down on him, making it harder to breathe. He began to isolate himself, avoiding public appearances and cutting off communication with all but a few trusted confidants. Friends who once flocked to his side now kept their distance, unwilling to be associated with someone whose reputation was crumbling. Amidst this chaos, rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed that Harlan was secretly negotiating plea deals behind closed doors, hoping to mitigate the damage before the trial even began. Others whispered about secret meetings with powerful allies, suggesting that strings were being pulled to protect him. While none of these stories could be verified, they added another layer of intrigue to an already dramatic saga. For the people of Maplewood, the uncertainty only deepened, fueling speculation and paranoia. Trust, once a cornerstone of their community, now felt fragile and tenuous. Karoline, however, refused to let distractions sidetrack her. She knew better than to get caught up in hearsay or conjecture. Instead, she focused on what mattered most: building an airtight case. Her team conducted mock trials, simulating courtroom scenarios to anticipate potential pitfalls. They rehearsed opening statements and closing arguments until every word felt natural. Witnesses were prepped meticulously, ensuring they could withstand aggressive questioning from Harlan's defense attorneys. Karoline herself spent countless hours reviewing financial records, double-checking figures, and tracing money trails. If there was even the slightest chance of error, she wanted to eliminate it. As the trial date approached, the media circus reached fever pitch. National news outlets descended upon Maplewood, turning the small town into a battleground for headlines. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, chasing after anyone remotely connected to the case. Camera crews jostled for position, microphones thrust toward unsuspecting townsfolk eager to share their opinions. Social media buzzed with updates, memes, and hot takes, amplifying the drama to a national audience. For Karoline, the attention was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it kept the spotlight firmly on the issue of corruption, drawing support from across the country. On the other hand, it subjected her to relentless scrutiny, with critics dissecting every move she made. Judge Harlan, meanwhile, grew, increasingly desperate. With each passing day, the walls seemed to close in tighter around him. His attempts to discredit the evidence faltered, undermined by the sheer volume of damning material. Even his closest advisors began to lose faith, urging him to consider alternative strategies. One evening, during a private meeting in his study, a trusted lawyer delivered a sobering assessment. "If we don't act decisively, this will destroy you completely." Harlan sat silently, his face pale, as the gravity of the situation sank in. For the first time, he entertained the idea of fleeing, a drastic measure born of panic rather than logic. What happened next shocked everyone. Just 2 days before the trial was set to begin, Judge Harlan vanished without a trace. News of his disappearance broke overnight, sending shockwaves through Maplewood and beyond. Early reports suggested he had boarded a private jet bound for Costa Rica, where he reportedly owned property. Others claimed he had used fake passports and aliases to evade detection. By morning, the story dominated headlines worldwide, transforming from a local scandal into an international manhunt. For many, his sudden departure confirmed what they had suspected all along: guilt. Karoline woke up to a barrage of messages and calls, each one relaying the same startling news. At first, disbelief washed over her. How could someone so entrenched in power simply disappear? But as the reality set in, a wave of anger followed. This wasn't just about Harlan anymore. It was about the principle of justice. Running away didn't erase responsibility, it compounded it. Determined not to let him slip through the cracks, Karoline immediately went into action mode. She coordinated with federal authorities, providing them with all the evidence she had gathered. Her team worked around the clock, assisting investigators in tracking Harlan's movements and identifying potential safe havens. The reaction in Maplewood was mixed. Some residents expressed outrage, accusing Harlan of cowardice for abandoning his post when accountability loomed. Others speculated about the circumstances surrounding his flight, wondering whether he had acted alone or received help from accomplices. A few even defended him, claiming he was being unfairly targeted and deserved the benefit of the doubt. Despite differing opinions, one sentiment united everyone: shock. No one had expected such a dramatic turn of events, least of all Karoline, who had steeled herself for a courtroom showdown, not a global chase. For Karoline, the challenge shifted dramatically. Bringing Harlan to justice now required navigating complex international laws and diplomatic channels. Extradition became the central focus, with legal experts weighing in on the feasibility of retrieving a fugitive judge from abroad. It was uncharted territory, fraught with obstacles and uncertainties. Yet Karoline remained undeterred. She leaned on her network of supporters, enlisting the help of advocacy groups, journalists, and lawmakers to keep the pressure on. Public outrage fueled the effort, with petitions circulating online demanding Harlan's return to face charges. Meanwhile, Judge Harlan found himself in unfamiliar territory. Hiding in a luxurious villa perched on a hillside overlooking the ocean, he struggled to adapt to life as a fugitive. Gone were the comforts of authority and privilege. Instead, paranoia consumed him. Every knock on the door, every phone call sent his heart racing. He relied on intermediaries to handle communications, fearful of direct contact. Nights were restless, haunted by visions of arrest warrants and extradition orders. For a man accustomed to control, the loss of autonomy was devastating. He questioned whether fleeing had been worth it, realizing too late that running only prolonged the inevitable. Back in Maplewood, life carried on amidst the turmoil, though nothing felt quite normal anymore. Conversations revolved around Harlan's whereabouts, with theories ranging from plausible to absurd. Some believed he had gone underground, living off cash reserves hidden in secret accounts. Others imagined him plotting a comeback, waiting for the perfect moment to re-emerge. In the absence of answers, imagination ran wild, filling the void left by uncertainty. For Karoline, the wait was excruciating. She understood that patience was crucial, but the thought of Harlan evading justice gnawed at her resolve. Yet amidst the frustration, moments of inspiration emerged. Karoline's fight resonated far beyond Maplewood, inspiring others to take a stand against corruption. People shared stories of their own battles with systemic injustice, drawing parallels between her case and their struggles. Grassroots movements sprang up, organizing rallies and campaigns to demand transparency and accountability. What had started as a personal quest for truth had blossomed into a broader movement, galvanizing communities across the nation. For Karoline, this collective energy reinforced her belief that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Days turned into weeks as the search for Harlan intensified. Federal agents collaborated with international partners, piecing together clues and following leads. Anonymous tips poured in, some credible, others dead ends. Progress was slow but steady, driven by relentless determination. Karoline stayed involved every step of the way, offering insights and resources whenever needed. She knew the outcome depended not just on legal proceedings, but also on public vigilance. Keeping the story alive in the media ensured that Harlan couldn't fade into obscurity no matter where he hid. For Judge Harlan, isolation took its toll. Cut off from the world, he grappled with regret and fear. Memories of his past, his rise to power, his decisions, his mistakes, tormented him. He wondered if redemption was still possible, if he could somehow make amends for the harm he had caused. But the path forward seemed impossibly narrow, blocked by consequences he couldn't undo. As days passed, despair crept in, leaving him questioning whether he had any future at all. In Maplewood, the sense of anticipation grew palpable. Everyone why? The hunt for Judge Richard Harlan became a global spectacle, drawing attention from every corner of the world. News outlets ran endless coverage, analyzing every scrap of information that emerged about his whereabouts. Satellite images of luxury, Villas in Costa Rica were scrutinized, and anonymous sources claimed to have spotted him dining at secluded restaurants or walking along remote beaches. Yet despite the constant flow of rumors, concrete evidence remained elusive. For Karoline Leavitt, this lack of progress was maddening. She had worked tirelessly to expose Harlan's crimes, only to see him slip through her fingers at the last moment. But she refused to let frustration derail her mission. Instead, she channeled her energy into ensuring that no stone was left unturned. Federal agents working on the case faced immense pressure to deliver results. The stakes were high, not just for Karoline, but for the integrity of the justice system itself. If a fugitive judge could evade accountability, it would send a dangerous message that power and privilege could shield even the most corrupt individuals from consequences. To prevent this, investigators collaborated closely with international law enforcement agencies, sharing intelligence and resources to track Harlan's movements. They traced financial transactions linked to offshore accounts, monitored communications between suspected accomplices, and deployed cutting-edge technology to locate him. Every lead, no matter how small, was pursued with urgency. Meanwhile, Costa Rican authorities came under intense scrutiny as questions arose about whether they were doing enough to assist in the manhunt. Diplomatic tensions simmered beneath the surface, with U.S. officials urging their counterparts to prioritize the investigation. Some accused local officials of turning a blind eye, suggesting that bribes or political influence might be shielding Harlan. While these allegations couldn't be proven, they added another layer of complexity to an already fraught situation. For Karoline, navigating this web of international politics felt overwhelming at times. She relied heavily on her legal team and advocacy groups to ensure that diplomatic channels remained open and active. Back in Maplewood, life continued against the backdrop of uncertainty. Conversations revolved around Harlan's disappearance, with residents speculating about where he might be hiding and what kind of life he was leading. Some imagined him living lavishly, enjoying the spoils of his ill-gotten wealth. Others pictured him holed up in fear, constantly looking over his shoulder. These musings reflected not just curiosity, but also a deeper yearning for closure. The town had been shaken to its core by the scandal, and without resolution, healing seemed impossible. For many, the thought of Harlan escaping justice altogether was unbearable, a betrayal of everything they believed in. Karoline understood this sentiment better than anyone. She felt the weight of expectation resting squarely on her shoulders. People looked to her not just as a whistleblower, but as a symbol of hope, a reminder that fighting for truth was worth the struggle. This responsibility motivated her to push harder, to keep pressing forward even when the odds seemed insurmountable. She gave interviews, wrote op-eds, and attended rallies, using her platform to keep the spotlight firmly on the case. Her message was simple yet powerful. Accountability matters regardless of who is involved. By refusing to back down, she inspired others to join the fight, amplifying her voice and broadening her reach. For Judge Harlan, life on the run was anything but glamorous. Hiding in a rented villa nestled deep within the jungles of Costa Rica, he lived in constant fear of discovery. Every sound outside his window, the rustle of leaves, the bark of a distant dog, sent his heart racing. He avoided contact with locals, wary of drawing attention to himself. Communication with family and friends was sporadic at best, conducted through intermediaries to minimize risk. Even basic tasks like grocery shopping became perilous undertakings, forcing him to rely on trusted aides to handle errands. The isolation gnawed at him, leaving him feeling trapped and alone. Yet despite his paranoia, Harlan couldn't help but reflect on the choices that had brought him here. Memories of his early days as a judge flooded back, days filled with idealism and a genuine desire to serve. Somewhere along the way, those aspirations had been corrupted by greed and ambition. He remembered the first time he accepted a bribe, convincing himself it was harmless, a one-time thing. That decision had set off a chain reaction, leading him deeper into a world of deceit and manipulation. Now, facing the ruins of his career and legacy, he wondered if redemption was still possible. or if he had crossed a line too far to come back from. While Harlan wrestled with regret, Karoline focused on keeping the momentum alive. She knew that public interest could wane if progress stalled, so she worked tirelessly to maintain visibility. Social media campaigns gained traction, with hashtags like #Justice for Maplewood trending worldwide. Supporters organized marches and vigils, calling for Harlan's capture and prosecution. Grassroots movements sprang up in towns across the country, inspired by Karoline's courage and resilience. What had started as a personal quest for accountability had transformed into a national movement, uniting people from all walks of life under a shared vision of justice. Behind the scenes, federal agents made significant headway in their search. A breakthrough came when an anonymous tipster provided critical information about Harlan's location. According to the source, he frequented a secluded cafe near his villa, often venturing out during late afternoons when crowds were sparse. Investigators pounced on this lead, deploying surveillance teams to monitor the area. Days passed without incident, testing their patience and resolve. Then, one fateful afternoon, their persistence paid off. Agents captured photos of a man matching Harlan's description, sitting at a table sipping coffee and reading a newspaper. It was enough to confirm his presence. With this confirmation, plans were set into motion. Extradition requests were formally submitted to Costa Rican authorities, accompanied by detailed dossiers outlining Harlan's alleged crimes. Legal experts worked around the clock to navigate the complexities of international law, ensuring that every procedural requirement was met. Diplomats engaged in delicate negotiations, emphasizing the importance of cooperation and mutual respect. Meanwhile, Karoline prepared herself for the next phase of the battle. She knew that capturing Harlan was only half the victory. Proving his guilt in court would require even greater effort and determination. As news of the potential breakthrough reached Maplewood, excitement rippled through the town. Residents gathered in cafes and parks, discussing the latest developments with a mix of optimism and caution. Some dared to hope that justice might finally prevail, while others remained skeptical, bracing themselves for disappointment. For Karoline, the renewed sense of anticipation was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. She allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection, standing on her porch as dusk settled over the horizon. The road ahead was still long, but she felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that perseverance could triumph over adversity. Judge Harlan, meanwhile, sensed that his time was running out. Reports of increased surveillance in his area reached him, through intermediaries raising alarms. He considered relocating to another safe haven, but options were limited. His network of allies had dwindled significantly, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. Nights grew increasingly restless, plagued by nightmares of arrest warrants and extradition hearings. Desperation crept in, prompting him to explore risky strategies to evade capture. Yet deep down, he knew that running forever wasn't feasible. Sooner or later, the net would close in. In the weeks that followed, tensions escalated as authorities closed in on Harlan's location. Federal agents coordinated with local police to execute a carefully planned operation. Surveillance drones buzzed overhead, providing real-time updates on his movements. Undercover operatives blended seamlessly into the surroundings, ready to act at a moment's notice. The meticulous planning paid off when, on a humid evening, agents surrounded the villa where Harlan was believed to be hiding. With precision and coordination, they breached the property, apprehending him without resistance. The fugitive judge was finally in custody. News of Harlan's arrest spread like wildfire, igniting celebrations in Maplewood and beyond. For Karoline, the moment was bittersweet. Relief washed over her, tempered by the knowledge that the fight wasn't over yet. Bringing Harlan to trial would demand every ounce of strength and focus she possessed. Yet, standing amidst supporters who cheered her name, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Their unwavering belief in her cause had carried her through the darkest moments, reminding her that she wasn't alone. As fireworks lit up the night sky in celebration, Karoline allowed herself a rare smile, a fleeting acknowledgement of how far she had come. For Judge Harlan, The reality of his situation hit hard. Handcuffed and escorted onto a plane bound for the United States, he stared blankly out the window, watching the lush landscapes of Costa Rica fade into the distance. The freedom he had clung to so desperately was gone, replaced by the cold certainty of impending judgment. Regret weighed heavily on him, mingling with fear and shame. He thought about his family, his reputation, and the legacy he had destroyed. Would he ever find forgiveness? Or was this the end of the road? Back in Maplewood, the mood shift. The extradition of Judge Richard Harlan marked a turning point in the saga that had gripped Maplewood and the nation. As he was flown back to the United States under heavy guard, the media frenzy reached new heights. Reporters camped outside airports, courthouses, and even Karoline Leavitt's modest home, eager to capture every detail of his return. The image of Harlan stepping off the plane, handcuffed and flanked by federal agents, was broadcast worldwide, a stark contrast to the confident figure who once presided over courtrooms with authority. For many, it was a moment of vindication, proof that no one could outrun justice indefinitely. Yet for Karoline, this was only the beginning of another grueling chapter. Upon his arrival, Harlan was taken directly to a detention facility where he awaited trial. His lawyers immediately filed motions seeking bail, arguing that their client posed no flight risk despite his recent escape. These attempts were met with skepticism from the judge overseeing the case, who cited overwhelming evidence linking Harlan to corruption and fraud. Denied bail, Harlan remained behind bars, his once imposing presence diminished by the cold reality of confinement. For someone accustomed to privilege and control, prison life was a harsh adjustment. Days stretched into weeks as he adjusted to routines dictated by guards and regulations, further eroding his sense of dignity. Karoline, meanwhile, threw herself into preparing for the upcoming trial. With Harlan now in custody, the focus shifted entirely to proving his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Her team worked tirelessly, organizing exhibits, rehearsing witness testimonies, and refining arguments. They knew the defense would fight, tooth and nail, employing every tactic available to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. This awareness fueled their determination. They couldn't afford to leave any gaps or weaknesses in their strategy. Karoline spent long hours reviewing financial records, ensuring that every transaction tied directly to Harlan's alleged crimes. Exhaustion gnawed at her, but adrenaline kept her going, driven by the knowledge that millions of dollars and countless lives were at stake. Public interest in the trial soared, transforming it into a spectacle unlike anything Maplewood had ever seen. News outlets set up live streams, providing round-the-clock coverage of pre-trial hearings and procedural updates. Social media buzzed with commentary, hashtags trending daily as people weighed in on the latest developments. Supporters of Karoline praised her tenacity, calling her a hero for standing up to entrenched power. Critics, however, continued to question her motives, accusing her of pursuing personal vendettas rather than genuine justice. Amidst the noise, Karoline remained focused, refusing to let distractions sway her resolve. For Judge Harlan, the days leading up to the trial felt like an eternity. Confined to a cell, he replayed past decisions in his mind, searching for answers that might explain how he had ended up here. Guilt and regret consumed him, leaving little room for hope. He clung to the belief that his legal team could salvage something from the wreckage, perhaps negotiating a plea deal or securing a lenient sentence. But as more evidence surfaced, emails, bank statements, and testimony from former associates, the likelihood of exoneration grew slimmer. Each revelation chipped away at his defenses, exposing vulnerabilities he had spent years hiding. As the trial date approached, tensions escalated both inside and outside the courtroom. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs demanding accountability and chanting slogans about transparency. Some carried photos of Karoline, hailing her as a champion of justice, while others held banners criticizing Harlan, labeling him a symbol of systemic corruption. Inside, the atmosphere was equally charged. Spectators packed the gallery, eager to witness history unfold. Lawyers shuffled papers, whispering strategies to their clients. The air crackled with anticipation, a palpable energy that seemed to press down on everyone present. When the trial finally began, it quickly became clear that this was no ordinary legal proceeding. The prosecution opened with a powerful statement, outlining the scope of Harlan's alleged crimes, and presenting a mountain of evidence to support their claims. Slide after slide appeared on a projector screen, each one revealing damning details. Offshore accounts linked to shell companies, fraudulent contracts awarded without proper bidding processes, and emails implicating Harlan in schemes designed to enrich himself at taxpayers' expense. Gasps rippled through the audience as new revelations came to light, some so shocking they sparked murmurs of disbelief. Harlan's defense team countered aggressively, attempting to discredit the evidence and cast doubt on the prosecution's narrative. They questioned the authenticity of documents, accused witnesses of bias, and argued that key pieces of evidence lacked context. Their tone was combative, almost desperate, as if they were fighting not just for their client's freedom, but for his very survival. At times, their objections grew heated, drawing stern warnings from the presiding judge to maintain decorum. Yet, despite their efforts, the weight of the evidence seemed insurmountable. Even casual observers could sense the tide turning against Harlan. Throughout the proceedings, Karoline remained composed, taking notes and occasionally whispering instructions to her attorneys. She understood that this wasn't just about winning a case. It was about setting a precedent, proving that accountability mattered regardless of status or influence. Every word spoken, every piece of evidence presented, shaped how people viewed the situation. And judging by the reactions around her, Karoline felt confident that she was succeeding. The public outcry following each revelation reinforced her belief that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Outside the courtroom, the drama continued to unfold. Media coverage intensified, with journalists dissecting every twist and turn of the trial. Late-night talk shows joked about Harlan's predicament while social media erupted with memes mocking his downfall. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves further, fearing guilt by association. Even his family bore the brunt of the backlash, receiving hateful messages and enduring whispered insults in public. His wife, once a prominent figure at charity events, retreated from view altogether, unable to face the judgmental stares of neighbors. It was as if the entire world had turned against him, leaving him isolated and vulnerable. Despite the chaos, moments of inspiration emerged. Karoline's fight resonated far beyond Maplewood, inspiring others to take a stand against corruption. People shared stories of their own battles with systemic injustice, drawing parallels between her case and their struggles. Grassroots movements sprang up, organizing rallies and campaigns to demand transparency and accountability. What had started as a personal quest for truth had blossomed into a broader movement, galvanizing communities across the nation. For Karoline, this collective energy reinforced her belief that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As the trial progressed, witnesses took the stand, recounting their experiences with Harlan and the corrupt systems he allegedly orchestrated. One particularly compelling testimony came from a former employee of a company implicated in the fraudulent contracts. Under oath, the witness described pressure from higher-ups to falsify records and manipulate data to benefit Harlan. His account painted a vivid picture of systemic corruption, implicating not just Harlan but others within the courthouse as well. When Harlan's lawyers attempted to discredit him, suggesting ulterior motives or bitterness, the witness remained steadfast, refusing to back down. "I'm here because it's the right thing to do," he said firmly, earning nods of approval from spectators. Days turned into weeks as the trial dragged on, testing the endurance of everyone involved. Lawyers argued passionately, judges intervened to clarify points, and jurors listened intently, weighing the evidence presented. By the time closing arguments arrived, both sides looked exhausted. Karoline exchanged a brief smile with her team, acknowledging the hard work they had put in. Across the aisle, Harlan sat slumped in his chair, his face etched with worry. Whatever confidence he had started the trial with had evaporated. replaced by a growing realization that the walls were closing in. In Maplewood, life carried on amidst the turmoil, though nothing felt quite normal anymore. Conversations revolved around the trial, with everyone speculating about what might happen next. Would Karoline emerge victorious, proving beyond doubt that Judge Harlan was guilty, or would he manage to evade accountability, walking away unscathed despite the overwhelming evidence? The uncertainty hung heavy in the air, casting a shadow over the once peaceful town. For some, the weight was unbearable. For others, it was a test of patience and faith in the justice system. Through it all, Karoline remained steadfast, driven by a mix of conviction and defiance. She understood that the fight ahead would be grueling, but she drew strength from the support she received. Messages of encouragement poured in from strangers across the country, praising her bravery and offering words of solidarity. These gestures buoyed. The final days of the trial brought an almost unbearable tension to Maplewood. The courtroom, already packed with spectators, buzzed with anticipation as closing arguments began. Karoline's legal team delivered a powerful summary, weaving together months of evidence into a cohesive narrative that left little room for doubt. They emphasized not just the facts but the moral implications of Harlan's actions, painting him as a symbol of unchecked greed and abuse of power. Their words resonated deeply with the jury and those watching from the gallery. When they concluded, there was a moment of silence before murmurs of approval rippled through the room. It felt like a turning point, a culmination of everything Karoline had fought for. Judge Harlan's defense team followed with their own closing statement, attempting to sow seeds of doubt about the prosecution's case. They argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that key witnesses might have ulterior motives, and that the sheer complexity of financial records made it impossible to draw definitive conclusions. Their tone was urgent, almost pleading, as if they were fighting not just for acquittal but for survival itself. Yet, despite their efforts, their argument seemed hollow in the face of the overwhelming documentation presented by Karoline's side. Even some members of the jury exchanged skeptical glances, signaling that the tide had turned decisively against Harlan. After hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the foreperson stood to deliver the decision. Karoline sat upright, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, while Judge Harlan slumped slightly in his chair, his face pale and drawn. When the words "guilty on all counts" echoed through the room, a collective gasp filled the air. For many it was a moment of vindication, a confirmation that justice could prevail, even against someone as powerful as Richard Harlan. Karoline exhaled deeply, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in months. Tears welled up in her eyes, not just from relief but from the weight of what she had accomplished. Across the aisle, Harlan stared blankly ahead, his expression unreadable, though the defeat in his posture spoke volumes. Outside the courthouse, the verdict sparked celebrations. Supporters of Karoline gathered spontaneously, cheering and chanting slogans about transparency and accountability. Strangers hugged one another, united by a shared sense of triumph. Social media exploded with reactions, hashtags like "Justice Prevails," trending globally as people around the world weighed in on the outcome. Journalists scrambled to capture the scene, interviewing residents and legal experts alike. For Maplewood, it was a cathartic moment, a release of pent-up frustration and anger after months of uncertainty. Yet amidst the jubilation, there was also reflection. Conversations turned to the broader implications of the case, with many recognizing it as more than just a victory for Karoline. It was a call to action for systemic reform. For Judge Harlan, the aftermath of the verdict was devastating. Sentencing hearings loomed, during which prosecutors argued for maximum penalties, given the scale of his crimes. Legal experts speculated that he could face decades in prison, along with hefty fines that would wipe out whatever wealth he still possessed. His lawyers attempted to negotiate plea deals or reduced sentences, citing his cooperation and willingness to provide information about others involved in the corruption scheme. But these efforts yielded little success. The damage to his reputation was irreparable, and public sentiment overwhelmingly favored harsh punishment. As he awaited sentencing, Harlan withdrew further into himself, consumed by regret and fear. Karoline, meanwhile, found herself thrust into the national spotlight. Interviews poured in from major news outlets, eager to hear her perspective on the case and its significance. She used these platforms to advocate for greater transparency and accountability, urging lawmakers to implement reforms that would prevent similar scandals in the future. Her message resonated widely, inspiring grassroots movements across the country. People looked to her not just as a whistleblower but as a symbol of hope, a reminder that ordinary individuals could challenge entrenched systems and win. Despite the attention, Karoline remained humble, deflecting praise onto her team and supporters who had stood by her throughout the ordeal. In Maplewood, life slowly began to return to normal, or at least as close to normal as possible. Conversations shifted from speculation about Harlan's fate to discussions about rebuilding trust within the community. Local leaders organized forums to address concerns about corruption and propose solutions. Teachers incorporated lessons about ethics and civic responsibility into their curricula, using Karoline's story as an example of courage and perseverance. What had once been a quiet town known for its picturesque landscapes now carried a deeper legacy, a place where accountability mattered and justice could be achieved, even against insurmountable odds. Yet for Karoline, the journey wasn't over. While the trial had been a monumental victory, she recognized that lasting change required sustained effort. She founded an advocacy group aimed at promoting transparency and holding public officials accountable. The organization quickly gained traction, attracting volunteers and donors passionate about making a difference. Karoline traveled extensively, speaking at conferences and meeting with policymakers to push for reforms. Her work became a full-time mission, driven by the belief that her fight had only scratched the surface of a much larger issue. As months passed, Judge Harlan's sentencing finally arrived. Standing before the judge, he offered a brief apology, acknowledging the harm his actions had caused. His voice trembled as he spoke, betraying a vulnerability rarely seen during his time in power. The judge presiding over the case delivered a stern rebuke, emphasizing the importance of integrity and trust in public service. In the end, Harlan received a lengthy prison sentence, along with substantial fines designed to recover stolen funds. As he was led away in handcuffs, cameras captured images of a broken man, once untouchable, now stripped of everything he had worked for. Back in Maplewood, the scars of the scandal lingered, but so did the promise of renewal. Residents took pride in having played a role in exposing corruption, seeing themselves as part of a larger movement for justice. Conversations turned toward healing, with initiatives aimed at fostering unity and rebuilding faith in local institutions. Karoline's name became synonymous with resilience and determination, inspiring future generations to stand firm in the face of adversity. For those who had doubted whether change was possible, her story served as proof that persistence and conviction could overcome even the most entrenched obstacles. Through it all, Karoline reflected on how far she had come since those early nights spent poring over financial records. What had started as a personal quest for truth had evolved into something much bigger, a catalyst for transformation. She often thought about the people who had supported her along the way, from friends and family to strangers who sent messages of encouragement. Their belief in her cause had kept her going during the darkest moments, reminding her that she wasn't alone. And while the road ahead remained uncertain, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey, for the lessons learned, and for the opportunity to make a difference. For Judge Harlan, the road ahead was bleak. Behind bars, he grappled with the consequences of his choices, haunted by memories of the power and privilege he had squandered. Days blurred together in monotony, punctuated by moments of regret and self-reflection. He wrote letters to his family expressing remorse and seeking forgiveness, though he knew repairing fractured relationships would take years, if it was even possible. In solitude, he confronted the reality of his downfall, realizing too late that running hadn't solved anything. All that remained was the hope of redemption, however distant it might seem. The story of Karoline Leavitt and Judge Richard Harlan became a defining moment in modern history, a testament to the enduring power of justice. It demonstrated that no one was above accountability, regardless of status or influence. For the people of Maplewood, it reinforced the belief that truth and fairness mattered, even when faced with overwhelming odds. And as the sun set on another day, casting light over the quiet town, there was a collective sense of renewal. The scars of the past remained, but so did the promise of a brighter future, one built on integrity, transparency, and unwavering resolve. Through it all, the tale served as a reminder that courage could spark change. Karoline's fight inspired countless others to speak out against injustice, to demand accountability, and to believe in the possibility of a better world. It showed that even in the face of entrenched power, ordinary individuals could rise up and make their voices heard. For those who dared to dream of a fairer society, her story was a beacon of hope, a reminder that perseverance, conviction, and unity could triumph over adversity. And as Maplewood moved forward, carrying the lessons of its past into the future, it stood as a testament to the enduring power of justice and the indomitable spirit of those who fought for it.